Patrick is the voice of the Janchi Show.
What?
So yeah, that's what my wife said. She was like,
show.
I think Patrick is like kind of the voice of the Janchi Show. I was like,
What?
"Yeah, I get
Why?
that."
I don't want that responsibility. I have to do my own voice. I'm too worried about my own voice.
I'm pretty sure if we were to go back and see who has led the most interviews, it would be you. So,
well, I think Sarah's the voice of the Janchi Show because
that's
she's
true. Yeah, arguably she
says the same thing every episode, introduces us. So
yeah, she needs to get a new script.
She's the
enough with the banter.
All right, we're good. Oh,
You're listening to the Janchi Show, hosted by 3 Korean American adoptees diving headfirst into what it means to be adopted, Korean American, and more. And now, here's your hosts, Nathan, Patrick, and KJ.
Welcome back to the Janchi Show. It's your boys, KJ, Nathan, and Patrick. We are here. We are live. We are ready to hang out with y'all. We have a really great interview lined up today with Kaytie Ohashi, and we'll talk more about that. But first, we wanted to jump into our interaction with Korean culture, with Korean identities, and just kind of our process with that. Our producer, Jerry Won, who is Korean American, sent us a message and just said, hey, March 1st is a pretty important day in Korean history and wanted to share it with y'all. And I am very grateful for him for always just throwing things out there and just being like, hey, you may or may not know about this, but this is, a big deal for Koreans, whether it was Lunar New Year or Chuseok or now March 1st or the 3-1 movement. So, yeah, Nathan, do you want to give just a brief summary of what it was, and whatnot?
As far as I read, it's essentially on March 1st, there was a protest of the Korean. I didn't see, was it mainly only South Korea that had the protest? Okay. But yeah, they protested against the Japanese occupation.
Well, actually, wait. It wouldn't only be South Korea because at that point the peninsula was still unified.
That's what I was thinking. It was still an entire continent, or it was all of the Korean people because everything, the Korean War hadn't happened, right? So
yeah, this is March 1st, 1919. For context,
I mean, protests of the Japanese occupancy. I guess they wanted to be liberated, and there was lots of deaths, lots of injuries, 46,000 arrests. I mean, it seemed like a fairly big deal. I haven't really read that much about it. This is kind of the first I've been hearing about it. So, curious on what you guys have seen or read about it.
Well, I just have the article that Jerry sent us pulled up here. I'm just reading about it.
It's from Wikipedia, so
yeah, from Wikipedia.
It's very accessible to our listeners. You're gonna want to Google the March 1st movement or Samil, which literally means 3-1 for the months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's stated as an unsuccessful protest movement by Korean students calling for independence from Japan, protesting the forced assimilation in the Japanese way of life. But it's one of the first or earliest public displays of Korean resistance during that rule from 1910 to 1945. So I didn't know anything about this. I just am now finding out about it because I didn't even see the message from earlier. And I think that's kind of what we wanted to just talk about a little bit is, how we've engaged with Korean culture before and, what we maybe regret about not having done so or been able to do so. And I think for me, that's honestly, when I see this, that's exactly what I feel is a little bit of almost shame, I want to say, for not knowing more about Korean history, especially after having done the show for like 4 or 5 months now. I feel like I've been just one-sided in the way that I've been approaching the history that I've been learning specifically. I'm delving a little bit more into Korean history, but it's been specifically focused on adoptee-related stuff. And so when I'm finding out about things like this, I'm like, man, why am I not learning about this? Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And so I just feel, like a little bit of shame there for having not done more. and I want to do more.
Well, but to be fair, I mean, how much about American history do you know? How much do you know everything about,
I literally know everything about American history.
You know everything about it.
Quiz me.
Every
Don't quiz
signature
me.
on the
Do not quiz me.
Declaration of Independence, what all 13
What is
stripes
Black
stand
history
for.
for 400?
Oh, no.
No, I mean, there's
That's
a
not
lot.
the right question.
I mean, there's so much to know about history in general. I think for us to know everything about American history and Korean history, we would really have to be very scholarly.
Yeah.
Which you guys are on your way. You read a lot more books, and you will eventually, I'm sure, delve into a book that has more information about this. However, I read like what I see online, and I just read that actually in South Korea, March 1st is actually a national holiday. So
I believe that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just feel like it's something that's important to me, or I think it's important for everyone to, at least know a little bit about your history. I should probably know a little bit more about American history, to be honest. I'm always surprised at the holidays that pop up, and I'm like, I should know that this happened on this day, and I don't. So
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just one of those things. Like as adoptees, you can feel a whole range of emotions, but we wanted to take a moment and just be like, these are things that we are coming across just now in our however many years of life that we have, and certainly for some of us, the internet hasn't existed for all of our existence, but for others of us, it has existed for all of our existence. So there's differing levels of being able to know things, but I think
feel that was directed
first
at
off,
me.
there's no shame for not knowing anything or for not engaging with anything. And certainly, I think that there can be feelings of guilt or regret, but you shouldn't be ashamed of your ignorance because, like Patrick said, like there are so many points of American history that we don't know. And that's really like, even if you were a good student, like systemically, if you're not taught about certain things like the Japanese internment camps, then like you're just not going to know that, and that's not your own fault. That's just a whole issue with what we decide to tell kids, and so like trying to pull in Korean history as well. Yeah, there's no shame in not knowing things, and I have loved doing this podcast for these little things that Jerry gets to send in, and he's like, hey, this is coming up, just FYI, and there's never an expectation of like you should talk about it. There's never an expectation of why don't you know this or anything. He's just like, hey,
Right.
No
just in case you didn't know,
judgments.
this is an important thing in our shared culture, and like as your cultural oppa and like person who knows more than you, like I just wanted to share that with you. And I think that's such a gracious way and really loving way to be like, here's some of your history, and here's like something that you may be interested in, but without the expectation of like, oh, you should go and read this, or without the expectation of like you have to know or have to even necessarily talk about it, so like this year we'll probably just be like, hey, this is a thing that we see and we now know about, and that's it. That's really all that we can say. But I feel like for us, like we don't know what we don't know. So if some holiday comes up in June for Korea, I'll be like, oh, is this a thing? That's cool. And then next year, I can make plans to celebrate that. I keep seeing this card game that was played. It's played on Happy Cleaners, which is a story about a Korean American family just living their life in Flushing, New York. But it's like I also saw it in Startup, and it seems to be like a really traditional game. I think they might have played it in Minari too, but like I don't even really know how to describe it. But I'm like, I want to play that game. I feel like I need to learn how to play that game and do that. But like, it's just this recent kind of re-exposure to Korean culture. I'm like, this seems fun. I'd like to learn a Korean game and figure out how to how to play this. So.
I want to know the game, and then now I just want to know what the history of the game is. Like, why were they playing
is it called
this in the
Go
first place?
Stop?
I have no idea. I'm gonna Go Stop,
because Go Stop was something that I had looked up actually for the Lunar New Year. It was one of the ones that
it looks
play.
like Go Stop
Okay.
is the game. So perfect.
Yeah,
All right,
so
there
they
we
play
go.
that.
Discovery on the show.
There you go.
Thanks,
You can
Nathan.
You can
and
buy
Google.
it on Amazon, and there are different versions of it. I actually looked into purchasing one just to see if my kids would like it. So
Yeah.
I have no clue how it's played, but yeah, it's that's Go Stop. So there you go.
I think we should find out if there is a digital version, like a Words with Friends version, so that the three of us can play.
That would
and then
be
we
cool.
just like for one of our shows or like a live stream, we can be like, "Yo, let's play Go Stop together."
I'm gonna get on there and crush you guys because I've already been on that game for months now.
You're
no, I'm just kidding.
ridiculous.
I'm
You're a dirty liar, Patrick.
Nathan was
I
like,
believed you for a second. I was like, what?
I've been playing Go Stop for months.
I'm a Go Stop master.
No, I have no idea how to play it. Wouldn't know the first thing about it. So I need the app. I need that app.
I don't know. So very exciting. Well, we have a really great interview with Kaytie Ohashi coming up. She is a Disney queen, and we are so excited to share her story with you, all about her adoption, about what led her into the scholarly world of Disney and Disney villains, her podcast, The Wonderful World of Disney Villains, and everything in between. So here is that interview right now.
Run in. I got to remember to bring it back to that later in the interview. Because now I'm going to ask. I got a question about it already.
About it. Yeah.
I know. I'm like,
why didn't we
haven't
start?
started
Patrick,
the interview.
hurry up with the start.
We kept talking about stuff. Don't blame that on me.
This content is gold.
All right. We are here with Kaytie Ohashi today. Kaytie, thank you for joining us here on the Janchi Show. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. How are you all?
Great.
I'm not
Very
doing too
full.
For the listeners, KJ has just eaten a boatload of chilies, and he is feeling good.
Wait, I feel like I should. Chili's the restaurant, not just like Chili's the peppers.
You should give context.
Yeah. So whatever. I'm very
Chili's
full.
rights reserved.
Just like some rights, not all rights. Some
Right.
rights of Chili's are reserved.
Exactly. We are extremely excited to have Kaytie here with us today, a fellow podcaster, and everything that we're going to get into, but also a fellow adoptee. So, Kaytie,
Yes.
for our listeners, why don't you kick us off with just a little bit of your origin story? Talk to
Okay.
us about a little bit about your adoption and growing up.
Yeah. So I grew up a bit south of Seattle, and I was adopted when I was 3 months old. And I'm an only child, so I feel like I should make that clear. My neighbors were Hawaiian, so I was always hanging out with them. They were the only people of color in my block, so I felt very connected to them. I related to them. They were always at my house. I was always at their house. They have 5 kids, and I'm an only child, so that was a very different dynamic.
And now they have 6
For
kids.
them, there's
yeah. So, but funny enough, all the kids in the block would always come to my house. So everything was always done at my house. I actually had a golf cart. We would drive it through. There was like a thorn bush field across the street from me, so we would just drive it through there, and we like attached this like beaten up cart to it, and we would pile all the kids in that, and we would just drive through it all the time.
Through the thorn bush. That just doesn't sound fun.
Oh, there was a path. There was like a distinct path through it for some reason, and I don't know.
that you blazed your first time through the bush.
And,
You're like, pedal to the metal!
and you hope nobody
yeah.
falls off into the thorn bush.
Yes. Oh, for sure. Because that metal carton thing was really heavy on your butt. You just bounced and hit it so many times that you're like, oh gosh, I gotta like grip it and hope that nothing happens. I don't go flying out. And by the way, it was safe. It was only like 6 feet, so it was a very short trip.
And there were small thorns. So it's okay.
Yeah,
Don't
it's
worry.
okay.
We're
It's
safe.
okay. Yeah, it is cash. But yeah, I had that lifestyle. My parents ended up divorcing when I was maybe 9 or so. And to be honest, I wasn't really upset because I was at that age where I was like, 2 of everything. Yay. Yeah. So I didn't really process that as thoroughly and probably as healthily as I should have. But, so my parents separated, but they stayed in the same school district. So I stayed at the same school. I did end up moving schools more close to like middle school and other, but actually one of my friends did too. So we ended up moving to the same school. And so I always had like someone everywhere I went that I was like, oh, I know you. Even if something changes, I'm good. I grew up going to a summer camp specifically for Korean adoptees and their siblings. So we would learn about different Korean heritage, like food, like how to make certain things. We did martial arts. We did like arts and crafts. We did dances. We did all these different things. And so I went to that every summer. Surprisingly, and for whatever reason, my class was always all boys, or like predominantly boys. I don't know why that age was only boys, and it's all people in the state of Washington who would attend this, and it was run by somebody who was also a Korean adoptee, and his wife who is Korean, and his daughter who is obviously Korean, and yeah, I just really was attached to that. As a teenager, we had the summer camp, but it was actually like a sleepaway camp. So you would stay at this cabin like for the entire week, and we did everything but Korean related things. So we would play soccer, we had dance competitions, we had like team building exercises, we did races, we did like a lot of singing and dancing, a lot of campfires. Basically, it was just singing and dancing the whole time. It's like, let's just play music and have dance competitions this entire week. I don't know why, but it was great. And for whatever reason, we never hung out we didn't hang out all year. And I was like, why don't we? Because you're my best friends. We should totally hang out all year. So I started calling them reunions, and I would like plan these events where we would get together, and nobody can drive, by the way. We're all like 14 years old. And yeah, we would get together, we go to the beach, we would do all these things, we'd have sleepovers, we just had so much fun. And so I like stuck with that. That was like one of my like favorite like growing up memories, and I'm still friends with all of them today. They went to my wedding, and funny enough, I used to be the one who lived the furthest away, and now everybody's slowly, like as adults, starting to move closer to me.
Nice.
Yeah, that was kind of my upbringing. I just was always really close to the Korean adoptee community. I married into a Japanese family who also have Korean adoptees in their family. So my my husband has 4 Korean adoptee cousins.
Cool.
2 from one family, 2 from another. Yeah, and they have very different experiences because they grew up in a Japanese household where they are also Asian. And so they don't have that difference that I have where I grew up in a white household. But at the same time, my parents did their best because they were very into Korean culture. Like my mom was very into learning and making sure that she knew like Korean words. I grew up with her teaching me how to cook Korean foods. And then I wasn't really into K-pop and Korean dramas at one point in time. And I got my friends on all of that and my husband on that level, where we watched Running Man and the Korean game show and other. Yeah, I felt like I was very involved. And I didn't feel disconnected in any way, aside from like, when you go to Korea and Koreans, are like, oh, you're American. But aside from that, and I don't really take that personally, but yeah, I've been very connected to the Korean heritage, the Korean adoptee community, and I've been to the International Korean Adoptee Association conference twice in Korea, 2013, and then recently 2019. So yeah, and the person who runs that conference is the person who ran my summer camp. So that's how I found out about it.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're always like, oh, the president of, who runs. And I'm like, yeah, like I grew up with them. Like the daughter is only a year older than me. And we grew up together and she's been doing this ever since. And, she's doing great things. Oh, and I totally forgot about this, but my godparents also have a Korean adoptee daughter. And I totally didn't even think about that, but I grew up with it in every realm. In my mom's side, I have cousins. My dad and I were actually adopted on the same day. So the day that my dad adopted me was the day that he was adopted into my grandparents' family and like changed his last name then. And so then my mom had to change her last name because she was obviously married to my dad and they had his old last name. And so they had to change that. And then on my mom's side, I have cousins as well.
You've been surrounded by it then.
Yeah.
That's great.
And I didn't even think about it growing up, to be honest, until like now. Where I'm like, oh, on every side, like even on my dad's side, one of my cousins is adopted, but domestically, not internationally. But yeah, in every aspect of my life, I guess I've always known somebody who's adopted. My roommate in college was adopted from China, which was totally like unexpected. And then another roommate I had, our like social drinking circle, had a Korean adoptee. And even at my job, so my first adult job as a college advisor, which is what I do now, one of the advisors was a Chinese adoptee. So just like in every aspect of my life.
I think that's one of the most interesting things that I've heard since like becoming engaged with the Korean adoptee community, just the adoptee community in general. Definitely, I think even on the show, we've heard stories about people that grew up with adoptees, but I feel like the ways in which your story flows through I guess adoption flows through your story is really like in depth and specific in a way that I've not heard before, which makes that really interesting. And I think too, having like read what you wrote on the guest forum and then having heard you speak a few times in Clubhouse and tell your story a little bit, I thought it was really nice to just be able to sit and hear you kind of give it all a little bit and put all the pieces together and put it all in one place.
Thank you for that too, by the way. Your guest form was probably the most filled out I think any guest form has been. So
yeah, we had
really good to read. Required.
We had somebody fill the form out that said, "I'm not going to answer any of these. You can ask me on the show." So we did.
I mean, they're not wrong either, though. I didn't think about that. I like to be thorough.
No, it was
great. That is very true. So I wanted to ask you about a little bit more about growing up in like where you grew up in Seattle. You said in your neighborhood, your neighbors being Hawaiian and having other adoptees to be around. What was the community like outside of that? Was it diverse at all, or were your parents just going out and finding places to put you into that?
They were finding places.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. No, the rest of my neighborhood was white. In my school, I can only remember 2 people of color in my grade. Maybe that was just my class. Like maybe I wasn't looking at other, first grade classes other than my own or something. But I remember a black kid down the street from me, and I remember a Japanese girl who rode the bus with me. But that was it. Well, yeah. And then when I switched and moved to a different elementary school, there was a Filipino girl and a black girl. And that was like my circle. And later, I mean, it diversified a little bit, but not really. And yeah, it was a very white, suburban, like middle class type of scenario or situation or growing up. And I mean, I knew a couple Korean and Asian folks growing up and going to school, but not many. Surprisingly, in high school, the only other Korean students were all men. Again, I don't know why. I couldn't really connect because I was like, yeah, we're both Korean, but you're boys and you're expected to be this way. And actually, funny enough, I feel like they were being rebellious, like they were purposely trying to debunk the model minority myth because they were purposely acting dumb. And I'm like, I'm sure you're not this dumb. I really am. And I can give you an example. One of them stole the answers to a future test, gave it to everybody in the school before the test. And so
even
everybody
the people that didn't
it.
take that class?
I don't know how you would know. And I'm like, how are you not going to get caught if you're telling everybody the answers to this test? And they did get caught and they were suspended. And I'm like, I'm sure you're smarter than this. Like,
we'll just push them back against that narrative. I like it.
I totally get that. And I was totally
there are
the
probably
opposite.
better ways to do that than stealing tests and giving it to students and getting suspended. But yeah. Live your life.
and I was like, not there yet. I was like, I don't really know what the model minority myth is yet. I'm just going to do my best, get A's, because I don't want to disappoint my parents, which is very stereotypical. I guess going back. So my mom, she purposely was always trying to find things for me that were related to my heritage. And she was also purposely trying to learn those as well with me. And she even says now, like, she's a Korean grandma and she has like a halmoni shirt, for my, because I have a baby. I should give context. I have a newborn. No, I'm not really a newborn. Thank you. He's 8 months. So I guess that's not considered newborn, more infant.
He's newborn enough.
Yeah. So I have an 8-month-old.
During the pandemic, it's kind of a newborn.
Yeah, it kind of
probably
blurs.
not many people have met him, right? So.
Yeah.
No, that's true. Yeah, and actually, I told my students, one of my students recently, I was like, "Yeah, my baby is 8 months," and she was like, "I felt like I just found out you were pregnant because I wasn't even showing for real. I wasn't even showing yet when the pandemic hit." I was 6 months. So I was like just starting to show. And then they were like, you're going to work from home from now on. So everybody's only going to see you from the shoulders up. So
There
it's
you
like,
go.
nobody knows.
Yeah, and then you'll come out of pandemic. It's like, look, I had a baby.
Exactly.
Yeah, it'll be his.
I had a
Wait,
baby,
really?
like,
Are shoulders
9
not
months ago.
famously a place where you carry baby weight?
Apparently not.
Yeah.
It's a little bit lower than that.
I don't know how babies work. We can talk about it later. It's fine.
I hear you. I have a 13-month-old, so I'm in the same boat. My
Newborn.
my sister hasn't even met my daughter yet. So
Oh, really?
yeah, because she lives out of state and we
okay,
can't
yeah.
travel. So
Yeah.
So I think that's really awesome to hear about, especially a white adoptive parent going out of their way to put their adopted child in these positions to connect with culture, and then not only that, but modeling that behavior by participating in those activities with you. I think
Yeah.
that is a big time thing that's not talked about a lot, is modeling, or at least in the conversations that I've been privy to. So were those experiences enough to kind of tide you over until the camp came around each year? Or was that the big focal point each year for really diversifying the experiences that you're able to have kind of throughout, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it does. And no, not really. I don't know. Adoption didn't really tie in for me. So for one thing, whenever we had like parent teacher conferences, my teachers would say, "Oh, like you must be Katie's mom. You two are so alike." And so it didn't really register that I was adopted. I knew I looked different. And my parents purposely had children's books about the non-nuclear family. So it'd have like interracial, like family and kids, or it'd have, like a parent in a wheelchair or a single parent or other dynamics. And I even had an adoption book of sorts, not about my personal adoption story, but just like the idea.
Adoption. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. The concept.
For the listeners at
of
home, I
it.
made a big old square in the air to capture all
reference.
of adoption. Yeah.
Yeah, in that box. So yeah, I mean, I just never really put it together because I think the people around me just didn't question it either. I mean, I had a couple strangers who'd be like, "You don't look alike. How could she be your mother?" But I mean, because of the positive, I guess, influence of everybody else not agreeing with that statement, it didn't really internally take that. And even at the Korean camp, we didn't talk about adoption. We only talked about like learning about Korean heritage. And then as teenagers, all we did were play sports and do things that were like physically tiring so that counselors didn't really have to deal with us. At least that was my
They
interpretation.
treated you like
Yeah,
puppy dogs.
that's my assumption at least. Yeah, we were very close-knit. We only talk about adoption one night at this camp. And it's usually like in the middle of the week. And so the counselors get together and we split up by gender, which was such a disadvantage for me as the only female of my age, where all of the other girls were like, if I was 18, they were 16 or younger and going through very different phases in their life than I was. And so nobody would say anything. And then I would talk to the boys and they were like, "Oh yeah, we had a very lively conversation. All we did was talk. And I'm like, why can't it be like age-based conversations? So at least for me, I didn't get anything out of the one time that we did talk about adoption. And even then, not all of the counselors are adoptees. So we had camp counselors from Denmark. We had one from France one year. We had one from Korea because they all come from ICA, the conference. So they're adults from that, and they purposely come over the summer. Yeah. So in all, like adoption didn't really. I wasn't really like seeking like, oh, I can't wait for this 1 week in the summer. And actually I would actually spend the week after at my friend at the oldest house. And we just had a sleepover for that entire week and we would just do everything there was to do around their house. So I would usually technically be gone for 2 weeks. But I always looked forward to it. I don't think it was the highlight of every single year, but it was definitely a significant part of my life where I definitely will never forget that experience.
it sounds like because of that, kind of going off of what Patrick said, you had that 1 week of, or 2 weeks, I guess, of all the, even though it wasn't adoption centered because they weren't really talking about adoption.
Right.
Were there moments that you felt you wished you had more adoption conversations? Or I mean, because you had a lot of conversation or a lot of adoptee connections, with other people that you knew and stuff like that. Was there other times where you're like, I wish I could talk to them about adoption? Or was there anyone that you specifically talked to with about adoption a lot?
Yeah, so the individual whose house I went to the week after, so him and another guy my age, we were like, I don't want to say we're like the Three Musketeers, but the three of us were always together. And so there's the three of us who spent that second week together doing like going to the movies or going to do other things. And so the three of us have definitely talked about it. We went to Korea together the first time in 2013 to the ICA gathering. And actually the oldest was already there, but his sister, myself, and the other guy flew together to meet him. And then the three of us actually went to the adoption agency to see like where we were, our first however many months of life. So the three of us definitely talked about it because we're all relatively the same age. We're all born within a year of each other, or like we're all born within 3 months of each other. So when the oldest was born and left, I was born. And then when I was getting ready to leave, that was when the other was born. So, and we all were from the same agency.
Wow.
Which was crazy. And so we all went together. We all like looked at our files together, but separate in separate rooms. And then two of us, myself and the oldest, decided that we would do the birth search. The youngest decided not to. And I just thought like, okay, yeah, I'll sign it. I'll fill it in, but I'm not really expecting anything. Literally a month later, I got an email saying that they found her and that she wanted to connect with me. And this was something that I talked about with my parents before. Like, I'm thinking about this, but I don't really need anything from it, or I'm not really anticipating anything will come out of it, but I just wanted to try. And I was probably 19 at the time, 18 or 19 years old. And so I was just like, I'll just do it just in case. And I got this letter saying, like, I didn't know your gender. I had no idea like anything about you. I would look at all these little children who I thought were about your age, thinking that could be you, that could be you. And I didn't want to give you up, but my parents didn't think I was fit to raise a child, which was really hard. And I think my mom and I read it together. I can't remember. And the funny, not so funny thing was they sent a picture of her. And so I showed my mom, and my mom actually felt relieved because she was like, oh, you don't look anything like her, which is like funny, but also not, And I thought it was funny that she said that. And I was like, oh, well, I'm glad you're okay with it. Because as an adoptee, you're super concerned about your parents' feelings in this matter, or at least I am, I should say, because I was so close to my parents. And the oldest actually did find his birth family as well, and he actually connected and met them, and has since gone back and forth to and from Korea to visit them. But I have not. I should emphasize. I did write an initial letter saying, like, I'm doing fine. You don't have to apologize. All these things. But then I just didn't keep up with it. I'm really bad at the pen pal writing letter, because I wanted to write by hand to then give the translator so that they could show my handwriting so that she knew it was authentic. It wasn't like made up and typed by some translator that wasn't me, so I wanted to be authentic, but I was in college. I couldn't keep up with it. I was working, and I did a 16-hour internship a week, and I was going to school full time. So I was like, and not that that's an excuse, of course, but I was like, nope, I'm not doing this. I am getting on with my life. And then right after I graduated, I went straight into my current job. And the first year of my current job literally drained the life out of me because I wasn't used to working 40 hours a week. And so that was a transition. And I just forgot about it until a couple years ago. And so my husband and I went to ICA in 2019, and there was different workshops specifically for partners of adoptees. So he attended those. I think I'm assuming he learned a lot about what it is to be married to an adoptee. And I started thinking about it again then. I was connecting to adoptees from Seattle, and we were thinking about having kids. And by that, I mean, like, we talked about it once at ICA in Korea. We talked about it once.
It's like
Well, you're
deep
thinking
into the
about it.
planning stages.
Oh, yeah. Like, we were like, should we have kids? I think we should have kids. How many kids are you thinking? And then end of conversation. And then,
All right, good night.
yeah,
Logical
it was a
conclusion.
great conversation. And then, lo and behold, the next month I found out I'm pregnant. So I was like, well, we're having a kid. Surprise.
It's like Inception or something.
Yeah. But so then that's when I really started thinking about it, because in every single appointment, they are asking me about my family history, my medical family, my family medical history. And I'm like, I have no idea. I don't know. I am adopted. I don't have access to that. I don't even, I have no recollection. And I guess I should give context. Before, like, while I was in Korea and before, not long before, but I was having a lot of thyroid issues. And so I was like actually going to the doctor around the time of Korea and later, where they were saying like, your thyroid records are off the chart and this is not healthy, and there's something like seriously wrong to the point that you should be in physical pain and you are not. Like, you seem very okay, but you should be like writhing on the floor in pain. Like, this is how high your records are. And I was like, I feel great. Aside from like throwing up every now and then, I'm fine. And then turns out it was the baby. The baby was making my thyroid charts go off the chart. And then once I had him, I was fine and back to normal. But in all those appointments, they were asking me like, what's your family history? Like, maybe this is, genetic or other. And I couldn't say anything. And even my mom would go to the appointments with me, or my husband would go to the appointments with me. And I'm like, what do you want me to say? Like, you want me to keep saying it over and over again? Are you trying to trigger me or something? Like, I can't tell you anything because I don't know. So in situations like that, like, I really wish I did know, and I really wish I had connected. But to be honest, other than that, I don't really feel like I need it. If anything, because I'm a person who likes to help others, and I've kind of been reading that might be like part of, it could be related to being adopted, is, trying to please everybody. But I am a people pleaser, and that's why I have a degree in social work. And I feel like I would want to meet her just to like make her feel relieved, so that, if she believes in some religion that I do or don't believe in, that she would feel like, she got her apology out, she can, feel relieved and move on with her life. But yeah, so my long answer.
No,
I think it was great.
That's really great. I mean, I can relate with the fact of seeing a photo for the first time and going, yeah, I don't feel like I look like them.
Yeah.
Because I had
Really?
the same reaction with my parents when I saw the photo. However, my brother was in the photo and I looked like him. And that's when it made me realize, okay, this is my family. Because but my parents, if you had just shown me a photo of my parents, I would have been like, I don't know. I don't know if I look like them. So
Yeah.
I can relate to that kind of that feeling when you saw that. Other things I have to say, I thank you for sharing all of that information about finding your mother, and the information about connecting and stuff. I think there's something to be said about being 19 and being overwhelmed with life that is understandable. I mean, that's a lot to take in when you have a moment like that, when you find your birth mom, but you're just getting going.
Starting life.
Yeah, I know. So I totally understand that. So
Yeah, I think it says a lot about the conversations that we've been having in terms of what it means to be an adoptee on this journey. And for everybody, some people are going to find relatives, some people are not going to. And at the end of the day, you can only do with that what you can do with that. I think when it's your time to reach back out, or whenever you feel that urge or that need, if you ever feel it again, then that's the right time. And I think when you bring up people pleasing and things like that, I do think that's heavily tied to being an adoptee, that empathy, I think, that we all try to project out and in, I think has a lot to do with it, because I'm definitely the same way. I definitely feel that people pleasing type of pull and wanting to do that type of work. So, yeah. I wanted to ask you what it was like the first time that you went to ICA. Especially because, you know, we had Glenn Morey on the show and he talked about going to the conference for the first time and how it was very transformational. And I think your experience is so different than a lot of adoptees because you've been able to grow up with a lot of other adoptees surrounded by that culture. And not only that, you were at the camp set up by the founder of ICA as well. So, you know, you're getting exposed to a little bit of that. What was that first trip like for you?
Oh my gosh. It was so much fun. It was like it was like the movie, like any girls trip movie that you would watch where like a bunch of friends are going out and they're on this adventure together and they're like experiencing everything for the first time and just having fun, getting lit, you know, all those fun things. That was us. Yeah. So I was 18 or 19 and you age up a little bit in Korea, and literally like all the older kids from camp who were able to go went. So it wasn't just like the three of us. It was the three of us plus the oldest sister. And so it was always the four of us together doing everything. And specifically the four of us, I guess we're very close together. So we stayed at our adoption agency and there was only 2 beds. So myself and the sister were together, and then one was on the floor and the other was in the other bed. So we stayed there for the first couple of days. We kind of like did the tours. We did like the late nights in Hongdae and other places. And then we went to the hotel because we were teenagers who couldn't afford to stay at the Lotte Hotel, which is this big, like you walk into the lobby and it's all gold. You're just like, I don't think I can afford to be here. Like, as a 19-year-old,
should I just go? I can't.
Yeah, I was
lobby.
like, is this the
real
right
gold?
place?
Is
Like,
this real gold?
but yeah, there was a giant like poster saying like, "Welcome, you know, to ICA,"
can't afford
and I'm like, yeah. So actually, like, we decided the 4 of us would share a room, and we would split the cost. And initially when we got it, it was this really cramped, like 2-bed bedroom. And we were like, I don't think the 4 of us can, like, we literally can barely walk through the door together. And so we upgraded to get 3 beds. And it was like super spacious, super big. And we split that cost. The bathroom was huge. And we were like playing with the phone in the toilet and like with the phone outside. Nice. And we were just having a great time. And now actually I think that was one of the first times I had drank because I was of legal drinking age. So I think that was the first time I drank alcohol. So we like the 4 of us went out to a Korean barbecue place. We had the spicy octopus and soju.
So your first alcohol was soju.
Yeah, and it was
very Korean.
Yes.
And you know, later when I was in college, I did like soju, but then I was like, no, I can't. That's so strong and gross. And actually, myself and the oldest were the same. We were like, I don't think we like alcohol, but the other 2 really liked it. And so we were like, okay, well, obviously we know whose sides are on whose. And I just remember it was also the first time that I saw my friends getting drunk. Because I obviously I never went to like high school parties or anything. So I was like, okay, this is interesting, especially since I'm so close to them. I feel like it's bringing us closer together. Also, I remember the oldest getting a little too tipsy and being naked in front of all of us. And I was like, oh no, please.
So this is
Would
what
not
alcohol
sign up for
does.
that kind of treat.
You know, we getting lit.
Usually it's tequila, not soju.
Yeah.
One in Korea.
Well, in ICA, if you go to ICA, they go out every night and they party until like 4 a.m. every night. And you know, back then I was like so into it. Like, yeah, let's all go. We're going to go to the club together. We're all going to have fun. We all dress up together. You know, we wear the fancy dresses, the fancy heels. We, you know, do the whole 9 yards, and we go shopping together. I mean, again, like I said, a lot of them were men in the group, and a lot of them were younger as well. But we would all go together as like a giant group of like, I think there was like almost 10 of us. And we would all we were like, oh, we're all from Washington, and we all came together, and we're all staying in different rooms, and we're all staying at each other's rooms, and we're having this great old time. And we would go shopping for each other and be like, I got you this, or I got you this. Do you think this is great? Do you think that is great? And it was just like a lot of fun. And I thought it was like the best experience of Korea that I could have had. that being said, I've been to Korea before with my family, but I thought that was like the most fun experience of Korea, and we would do all of the things together. We didn't do the workshops though. That was the one thing we're like, we don't want to be stuck inside. We want to go to Myeongdong. We want to go to Hongdae. We want to go to all the places. We don't want to be stuck inside. I mean, we're teenagers, right?
Right.
Sure.
And we're the oldest, 19. So you got to think 19 and under is what we're working with. And yeah, so we get like the tall ice cream, or we would go and put the locks on and the locks of love. And no, we did not. But it was a lot of fun, and I really liked that we had that experience together, because it was the first time to Korea for a lot of them. We had like the big fancy dinner together, and we saw like K-pop groups because they had them at the closing ceremony. And it was just so much fun, and seeing them, for the entire week together. And actually we stayed for 2 weeks. So it was kind of extended. And then going to Ica the second time was a lot different, because the weather was 10 times worse than I remembered it being, because it was monsoon season. It was all thunder and lightning the entire time we were there. So I felt horrible because it was my husband's first time to Korea. But we kind of just spent the entire time inside. Yeah, it was like literally downpour, thunder, lightning, dark all day, every day. It was, and humid, obviously, right? Yeah. And so we had scheduled these tours, but we obviously didn't go on them because we're also homebodies. And it was just kind of bad. But we went to all the workshops because of that. I only remember one though, or no, I should say two. So there's an age, for those of you who've never been to Ica, there's an age breakout group. So you just get to meet everybody who's your same age. But for me, because
Nathan.
I'm not, for me, because I'm younger, it's not accurate. It's basically kids camp all over again.
Nice.
It's 18 to 29-year-olds was my age group.
Oh, so just a small, very similar stages of life.
Sure, yeah, completely.
So I think I was the oldest. So it was literally just like me with my like full adult life and bills and all these college students.
I hear you.
And I was like, what's the fairness in this? Everybody else gets like the 31-year-old group, the 32-year-old group, the 35-year-old group, the 40-year-old group. Like, there was enough. But for me, I was like, okay, I'm not getting anything out of this. But yeah, definitely the first time was like the best time ever. I met Korean adoptees from Australia, from France. I met the twins, the Futterman twins. I also met Dan. If anyone's heard of Dan, who has the two documentaries. Yeah.
Episode 7.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've met him multiple times. He came to my college and premiered his documentary.
And that was in 2013. That actually might have been about when he was doing his documentary.
Yeah, he was filming it because my friends are in it.
Yep.
There you go. Yeah, if you're watching it, you can see like some of my friends. One of my friends was in his like scavenger the Amazing Race group. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then one of my friends is just so stinking tall that in every shot you see him. It's like, dang. I was always next to him, but you can't see me because I'm so short.
I was in the shadow. So Kaytie, I'm curious, having listened to all of your story, I'm just curious, one of the things that's been rattling around in my brain, and I think in my co-host's brain a little bit, is like we talk about our identities and our relationship to adoption, to Koreanness, and to Asian Americanness as kind of 3 separate things. So you've had a pretty unique story, even in the scope of our own podcast, about your relationship with adoption and adoptees. But I'm curious where you land at this present moment with those 3 things. Like, do you feel like, do you claim yourself as an adoptee? Like, is that an identity that you name and claim, or is that just like, nah, I mean, that's a fact of my life. It's not like a thing. Or like, do you, like, because of your mom's work in raising you and things like that, you're like, I feel very close and feel very comfortable calling myself Korean. And then, like, just, yeah. So with Asian Americanness, like, I don't know, like, it's for the 4 of us here on this particular episode, being raised transracially, I think we each have our own journey with claiming that. So where do you find yourselves in those intersections?
Yeah, it's funny. So my mom is Scottish, and so I grew up always calling myself Scottish Korean American. And I went to like the bagpipe events. I always saw men in kilts, like the whole 9 yards. And you know what's funny is when I was going through my social work program, there's a particular class that you have to take as a junior that is a facilitation where they purposely try and pair you with your classmates who are opposite you, like in every possible way, gender, race, sexuality, nationality, like any type of way. And you have facilitated discussions with seniors. So the seniors facilitate the discussion. And there was one particular day where we had to break up by race. And so they were like, if you're a person of color, you go to this room. If you're white, you go to this room. If you're biracial, you go to this room. And even in like, you shouldn't really combine all the people of color together because they all have such different experiences.
Yeah, it's like, oh,
And it
what's
was-
the rest of the world feel like?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
it was very
18 to 29, fools.
Yeah, exactly. It was very divided because so I went to the people of color group, but I was like, oh, I never really thought of myself as a person of color. But I know I am, and I know I identify that way. And in college, I always said I was Asian. And so I went to the person of color group, and it was so weird. Like all of the Asian individuals somehow like migrated and happened to sit next to each other without thinking about it. And then the Hispanic, Latinx, Black all sat on the other side of the room. And it just felt so, I mean, we totally weren't divided, and we totally, support each other and love each other. But it was just such a weird
Subclick.
thing. Yeah. And it was like all of the Asians agreed on this thing, but everybody else disagreed with that, or vice versa. And afterwards, one of the facilitators came up to me, who I also believe identifies as Asian, if I can remember correctly. And they were like, I'm surprised to see you here. I thought you would have gone to the biracial group because even though you're Korean, you identify as Scottish. And I had never thought about that. I was only thinking about it like externally, what do you see? So that's where I should be. But then in the group, I was like, I can't really, yeah, but also, I don't know if I didn't have Asian parents, so what? Okay. So I was just kind of so mixed. But then after, working in my field and a college and higher education, everybody's always learning everything. And the idea of being Asian kind of was more ingrained in me at that point because you're in college and literally on the registration form, it asks you what your race is. It's like, we took it off since then, but it was still there. And so, I mean, I had a student come up and be like, I love your culture and I love your food and I'm like, I'm sorry, what? Like what? I didn't even tell you, like, how, like, what are you getting this from? And also I should clarify, back then I had a very white last name, but yeah, it was just kind of ingrained in me because the other person, the Chinese adoptee, her name was also Kaytie. And so the only way that people really differentiated us was by our ethnicity, which is messed up, I should say. But people would say like, who's your advisor? Kaytie. Great. Which Kaytie? The Asian one. Great. Which Kaytie? It just keeps going. Mm-hmm. And so really the only way for people to differentiate us was either, saying, oh, Korean or Chinese, or if they happened to know where our office was. But at the time, our offices were right next to each other. So it didn't really help the front desk. So it kind of started getting more into, oh, I should say I'm Asian. I should say I'm Asian American. I should say I'm Korean American. And adoptee is kind of just a fact for me. It's not something that I like stick and label on every single thing that I have or am or whatnot. Like, I also feel like I have to explain what adoptee means to a lot of people because they may not know what it means. So I just don't mention it. There was one instance in college where I was working at the study abroad international department, and I was working with an advisor, and he forgot everything I said every single time I said it. And he would always ask me about my parents and how they were doing, and I would and he would ask them specifically like Asian parent specific things, and I have to explain every day that my parents are not Asian, they are white. And I just gave up. I was like, I'm not even gonna say I'm adopted. I'm just gonna say, yeah, sure, let's go. But yeah, and then to add on to it, so maybe because I'm a person of color, I was invited or voluntold, I can't even remember, to Student Life to be a part of the Identity, Culture, Inclusion club group. I'm not really sure what it was. It was a certificate that students could get if they attended workshops, presentations, etc. about diversity. And so I was invited to do a workshop on, I think anything, but I chose intersectionality. And I did a presentation on intersectionality with the other Kaytie, and we kept doing it, and we did it at the Students of Color Conference, the Faculty and Staff of Color Conference, and then she eventually left, so it was just me. And I continued to do that work. I continued to do presentations on like unconscious bias and stereotyping and microaggressions and other things. And then eventually, you know, leading up to the past couple years, I was nominated to be on the Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Committee for my campus. And also, I was asking for professional development. So I was told to look into the Multicultural Student Services Directors Council, which is a state level representative position. So now I represent my college for the state in that committee that is working to, you know, bridge gaps in education and also plan the Students of Color Conference, among a lot of other things that are related to diversity and equity, belonging, pluralism, and other. So I've been doing that related work a lot over the past 4 or 5 years, I would say. So because of those reasons, I feel obligated to say I'm Korean American or Asian American or other, because that's what people see on the outside. And also I'm doing the work, so I can't really say I'm not, because obviously I am, and I'm doing the work and talking about stereotypes and oppression and all these events that are going on, and, you know, Black Lives Matter and all of the like elderly Asian hate and, you know, literally all the political events, which, to be honest, I was not really keeping up with the past year because I did, in fact, have a baby. So, yeah, so I guess I was kind of forced into it. But I do identify as Korean American more than Asian American, even though I know it's like one and the same. But I just feel like, and I don't know if you feel the same, that I just can't relate with Asian American at the same level because I'm an adoptee. And not that that's a bad thing, but I do think that adoptee should be its own separate category. Not that we should even have categories or labels to begin with, but, you know, it is what it is.
I think something that you said, being adoptee or being adopted is a fact. Like, that's a thing that's just a fact about you and or about us. And I think that I think this conversation is interesting because I've been having this a similar conversation with another group of adoptees the past few days. And, you know, one of the things that we talked about is, how do we have the conversation where it doesn't feel like you're labeling someone as adoptee first who doesn't want to have that label put on them, you know, in the group of adoptees, you know? I think, and it's a difficult thing to navigate appropriately, but I think something that we talked about was the fact that we are all individuals and we throw around, we're not a monolith, you know, a lot, but it really rings true here because I think if you don't want to identify as adoptee first, then you shouldn't have to have that thrust on you. You should be able to identify as Asian American or Korean American or Chinese American or just Chinese, you know, whatever you want, however you want to identify yourself, as long as I feel like it lines up with those facts. Obviously, if you're misidentifying yourself in a way that's appropriative or anything like that, I say all of that just to say that you absolutely should not feel, or no one should feel, that they have to be adoptee presenting first. I think it's very interesting because I, myself, almost gravitate in the opposite way. I think the other day I was introducing myself to a group of people, and I introduced myself the way I do in adoptee spaces, as like an adoptee. And that was the first time I ever realized that I was doing that. But it also was like an epiphany for me that this is where I am now. And honestly, if I'm being totally honest, I identify more as an adoptee specifically than I do as a Korean or as an Asian person. You know, it's been really hard. I think just the work that I've done so far has just been very adoptee leaning, and it's been hard for me to get into the culture as much as my fellow co-hosts or, you know, as other adoptees that are doing it. And so I think this is a really extremely important conversation. I really liked everything that you had just touched on in terms of how to identify and, you know, why that's important. I think it speaks a lot to the work that you're doing now. And so one of the things that you're doing for work that's slightly different is this podcast. So I wanted to know.
No, not our podcast.
Yeah, not our
Right.
podcast.
Right.
Not our podcast.
Katie's
Your own
podcast.
Hey, I'm a new host.
So I wanted you to tell our audience a little bit about your podcast, and then I have a
Yeah.
couple questions. I don't know about the rest of the guys,
Oh, yeah.
but
I've been
definitely have
listening
a
to
couple
episodes.
questions about that as well. So.
Oh, really? Oh, good. I always like when people say they listen because I have no idea. So,
No, it's great.
yay.
I also live in Anaheim, so I'm
okay.
immersed into
Yes.
Disney.
She's like,
Oh my
"We're in."
gosh.
Yes, we're in.
Yeah,
I
I
actually
would-
wore a Mickey Mouse shirt prior to us starting this, and it just looked weird because it was cut off here, and it wouldn't.
Oh
have,
no.
But
I
just
would've
letting you
gotten
know,
it. I
I was
would've
going to
been like-
support and show the shirt, but that
I
not
have so
our
many Disney
listeners can't see.
shirts. Yeah. That's
Well,
the
I
point.
am loudly and proudly wearing a Disney shirt
Oh,
Are you?
that our listeners can't see.
I'm wearing a plain brown hoodie, but I have
Nice.
Star Wars posters in the back. That's
No.
Disney.
There you go. That
That's
counts.
Disney now.
That's better than my
Barely.
room.
there.
I wish we were in my living room, you guys. So my husband actually like made this collage of our wedding, and all the pictures line up on the wall, and it makes the Disney castle.
That's
When you
pretty
look
cool.
at it, yeah.
That's pretty
so
cool.
used to, but I'm not there right now. so
I
you
just
can't
heard
see
the.
it, but
Yeah.
yeah, we have all
And
these
you turn the
little
lights
Disney-
on, fireworks go over.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
Tinkerbell flies over. Like, what?
Yep. We have a little Disney decal in our bathroom downstairs, and it's just like against the wall. And it's Gus and Jack, the mice from Cinderella, and they're running into the little mouse hole.
Nice.
So we have little things like that all over the house. But
Nice.
yeah, anyway.
Our listeners are like, wait, what is it? Tell us, tell us.
Yeah, so the Wonderful World of Disney Villains podcast is a podcast where I talk about the social identities and oppressions of Disney characters, specifically Disney villains, which a lot of people are like, Disney villains are oppressed? I don't understand. I don't get it. Well, they are. And I did research and I did a whole master's degree about it. So
Yeah,
there.
you tell them.
Yeah. I mean, master's degrees
are.
if you guys done.
So I have a master's degree in cultural studies, and I was trying to decide what I was going to do my thesis on related to social identities, diversity, and other things. But I also wanted it to be about something that I was interested in. And while I'm interested in higher education and bridging those gaps that face students in regards to homelessness, race, and systemic racism and other, I wanted to do something more fun. And people kept referring to me as the Disney person who knew everything about Disney. And I was like, I don't know where this idea is coming from and why you keep telling me that I should answer every question related to Disney like I'm a trivia person, but I will do it for you. And so
But I'm not mad. I
I'm not
can
mad.
do this.
I will do it. And all of my assignments were always like Disney related, and we had to do like a show a performance of some sort. So I showed this parody musical called Twisted, which I talk about all the time, by Team Star Kid on YouTube, where they literally just parody every Disney movie, and they talk about how Disney is buying Pixar through this musical, and it's a full-blown musical, costumes, mics, and everything. They redid all the Disney songs, and the intro song is Jafar singing the song from Belle, the initial song from Belle, and everyone's saying F you, Jafar, instead of Belle. And they're saying, you're ugly, you're, old, and you're not going to amount to anything because you're not pretty, young, and us. So check it out. I think it's great. Yeah. And, yeah, it's about, Jasmine, and she's too naive to understand anything because she's only 16, and Aladdin is 33, and there's all these other things. And I thought it was hysterical. So I started from that. I did an independent research class with my advisor, who also loves Disney villains. And I binge watched the TV show Once Upon a Time. Because you can do that in independent research, where you can just do a critical analysis of an entire TV series, which was 7 seasons. And that was like the best quarter of my life. And just my entire class, I was just doing that. I'm like, oh, I have to go watch this. I'm so sorry. This is part of my assignment. Oh boy. And I just wanted to keep doing that. And so I was like, what better way? We watch Disney all the time. My husband purposely got a Disney Plus account because he knew I'd want it. And he loves Disney as well. I don't know if he loves it as much as I do, but I know he does. And we literally watch Disney Plus all day, all weekend, all the time. And we're really into superheroes and all that. So I did another independent research class on the Legends of Tomorrow TV series, if you've seen that on the CW. Okay. I did a whole paper about Sarah Lance and how badass she is, if I'm allowed to swear, as the White Canary. And I just wanted to keep going with it. So my final my advisor said, do something different. Don't do a paper like everybody else, because that's so, white, patriarchy, male dominated, like hetero, all that normative stuff that higher education tells you that you have to do. And you don't have to do that. So I want you to do something different. I want you to think outside the box. I want your thesis and your final to be something like creative and different. And so I was like, okay, so part of it was a podcast episode that is not ever going to air. And the other part is a blog, which is the Wonderful World of DisneyVillains.com blog. And then from there I was like, how am I going to keep up with this? I went through life, had a baby, and I was literally, on maternity leave. Like, I'm going out of my mind. I need to do something. And I started going back to work. None of my students know I was there. For an entire month, my students just didn't know I was around. And I was trying to tell them, emailing them, spamming them, like, I'm here. Please, talk to me. Please let me help you register. Please let me do something, please. And so I was like, maybe I should do a podcast. So I started doing that. And I was like, what am I going to do a blog about or a podcast about? Oh, Disney, obviously, because that's my entire life. And not my entire life, but you know.
Like a strong 80% of your life.
A strong 80. Yeah, for sure. And so I started doing the podcast. The first episode was a professional development workshop that I made for the college that I work at. And then the second episode was my master's thesis paper, I guess you would say, because I did still do a paper on top of this. So that was that. And so you could hear my scholarly side, my academic side, and the breakdown of why I believe Disney villains are oppressed and why they represent marginalized communities and how that criminalizes people of color, people with non-standard U.S. dialects, the LGBTQIA community, and so many other identities. And then, so episode 3, I just did my own opinion. I really love the TV show Aladdin. That was one of the first things that my husband and I connected with when we met. It was just the fact that he knew that there was a TV show. It was my favorite TV show growing up, and no one really knows about it. So I did a whole episode talking about the villains from the Aladdin TV show. If you're in Germany and you have Amazon Prime, I'm told, then you can watch this. Otherwise, you can't, unless it's pirated.
You need to get some VPN, girl.
Yeah. I didn't know about it until you mentioned it on your podcast.
Yeah, I talked a lot about Jasmine saving Aladdin from villains instead of the other way around, and how I really gravitated towards that, and that was what I connected with as a child. It changed the narrative of how women are portrayed, I thought, and so I really gravitated towards that. So that's what episode 3 is about. And then episode 4 was about dating culture in Disney princess films with the Damsels in the DM podcast, which is really awesome because their entire podcast is about female stereotypes in relationships and the female narratives about relationships and others. If this is coming out in March, I have a special guest. I am such a huge fan of the Bechdel cast. So I have Caitlin from the Bechdel cast, and we're talking about female representation in Disney princess films. So princess versus villain, and just the different tropes of, where is the female villain going up against the male protagonist? Are female villains just not seen as good enough for a male hero? There's only a female villain if there's a female protagonist, and that's messed up. Like females can definitely go up against men. You see it with princesses because they're trying to be all like female empowerment and, teach girls to, be strong, but they don't do it the opposite way. And it's kind of messed up. Like a man can get beat down by a woman. Like, and I should say boy, because they're usually boys. So a boy can be beat down. Yes. Like Mulan. But flip it and have Mulan be the bad guy or the bad girl. That
would be amazing, actually.
Yeah. So we talked about that. I'm really excited for that episode to come out. I was able to book a former Disney engineer who worked on Star Wars, the Star Wars land. And
Nice.
I have another guest coming up, your former guest, Lauren, and we're going to talk about adoption tropes in Disney princess films. So like the lack of processing and trauma that goes on with family separation. And I have another guest. We're going to talk about makeup and, lighter versus darker complexions, and Disney villain makeup being quite intense and being like cut creases and other versus the light, the fair, barely even there. type of princess makeup. So I have a lot of things in store. I'm really excited to talk about them.
Well, when you do a WandaVision episode, let me know. I'll come on and we can talk about it. We can dig deep into the MCU and then also the
that might
comic
have to be
book as
later.
well.
Patrick's a big nerd.
We love the MCU. We rewatch those all the time.
Oh, I know, me too. And for some reason, my wife just does not want to just watch them all the time. And a straight rerun with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and
can't win them all,
of the
man.
Netflix shows added in there. I don't know why. It's not even that
All
much
of
time.
the Netflix shows, really?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yikes!
Oh,
I mean,
still
Defenders
have
is
to do
not
that.
the best, but Daredevil,
That's
all
what
three
I've heard.
seasons, great.
Sure. Daredevil's the best one.
I won't get into it.
No.
But.
I like the fact that you're going to be doing an episode about the Disney adoption, I guess the characters that are adopted, because, we've talked a little bit about that in the past, Hercules and technically Lilo and Stitch and
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Penny
Tangled.
from the Rescuers. There's a lot of that. And
We just watched The Rescuers the other night.
It's
And they
an
just don't talk
interesting
about
thing
it.
that a
Yeah.
lot of people haven't thought about Disney films. And Tarzan was adopted by apes, but
That's true.
that is a
Kristoff
form of
was adopted
adoption.
by trolls.
And so I'm interested in hearing what you guys have to say about that. I really loved your last episode with the girls.
Yeah.
And talking about how the damsels in distress and all that stuff, and the way that it was turned around too, where you talked about how the women have the more recent films have shown more women
More
empowerment,
agency.
and
Yeah.
I really love that as well, showing that there's lead roles like Moana, and which actually
Yes.
one of the girls on the show said that they hadn't seen Moana yet, which I was like, oh my gosh, Moana is such a great one.
I had to like give a pitch about it. I was like, this is why you should watch Moana. Please watch it for X, Y, and Z reasons. And I
Yes.
will keep going if I have to. I'll tell you the whole movie if I have to.
And Tangled too. Yeah, there's some really good ones out there. I think you have something special with that podcast. I think there's gonna be a lot of listeners. You guys have any?
All right.
I know. There's a long pause that we
I
may
thought
have
I
to
thought you were going to go back in. We have those sometimes. where
Apparently
we
there
just-
wasn't like a clear ending with that. It was just
No, I know. I started.
I thought
thinking,
Nathan was
going to
gonna
have a
ask-
follow-up question.
I thought
about
Nathan
that?
was following up, but he did not come back in,
I
and I was
didn't.
like, "Oh, I wasn't prepared."
didn't
I was
come
thinking
in.
about the episodes.
That's
and,
my
and things
bad.
like
Was
that.
not
so-
prepared.
Nathan is just casually fanboying your podcast.
Okay.
It's fine.
Yeah.
I
I
love
do have a
that, though.
question, and my
Yes.
wife wanted to ask it as well.
Okay.
After
How
that
do you
pause.
like the other, not necessarily Disney, but just films in general that show the other side of the villains, like for example the musical Wicked?
Yes, I love Wicked so much.
face
Oh my
you
gosh.
made after you said "Wicked"?
Yes, I love Wicked. I love Once Upon a Time. I love Twisted. The musical that I mentioned is also very heavy on the villain narrative. Maleficent, and actually Lauren and I were talking, Maleficent and that trope of adoption was also really interesting for us, and the way it was portrayed. Like my mom was like, oh my God, did you see that moment when, like this happened, and you could see their like mother-daughter relationship, and like how, this moment is, in the adoption narrative in another, not in those words, but it was just something that my mom and I were able to, like, a very short connection, but we were able to connect, like, oh, she sacrificed herself for her adopted daughter, but we didn't use those words, because that's crazy. And yeah, just other narratives like that. We have the Disney Villain board game. It's a very
Nice.
challenging and strategic game.
Villainous,
It took us 3
right?
3 hours to figure out how we actually should play this game.
I love how deeply on brand you are.
I am
No way.
so on this.
I saw on Disney Plus today that they added an Into the Woods, also, which I haven't.
Oh, really?
seen.
Oh, did they have
Yeah.
that today?
Yeah,
It's
they
on
just
there.
added it. I haven't
Ooh.
seen it yet, but it's a musical. So
Yeah,
they-
I've seen that a lot.
James Corden
a little
and
too
everyone.
much.
Yeah, you've seen it a lot, so it's okay. It's on my watch list. So
So, Kaytie, if people want to reach out to you and talk to you about Disney and villains and any of the academic work that you've talked about, really anything that you've talked about on this podcast, where can people find you on the web?
On Instagram, I'm very heavy on Instagram. I feel like my Instagram handle is really hard to say, but I'll spell it out. So it's Diz Villain Scholar, DIS Villain SS Scholar. But
Can you spell
Nice.
villain
I
just
guess
in
I
case
said
we
that.
need it?
VILLAIN.
For the listeners.
I like the play. It's
Yeah.
Dis Villain Scholar. It's not like Disney Villain Scholar.
Yeah.
It's
That's what
this
it's meant
one.
to be, but there's a limit on characters.
Right. That's the worst
No, I
part.
think it's a good. Yeah, it's a good double meaning.
Yeah, and the podcast has its own Instagram handle as well. WW of Dis Villains. So Wonderful World of Disney Villains. And you can find the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and iHeartRadio.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
you
that
go.
was added on my birthday. I was very excited.
Heyo.
That's exciting.
That's awesome. For the listeners, we will put it in our show notes, which we put a lot of work into our show notes, so please look at them anyways. But it's very easy. You just click where it says the handle, and then it takes you straight to Instagram
Straight
or
to
the
it.
podcast feed, whichever.
I link
Perfect.
them myself, usually.
Usually.
I changed them all because they're wrong, so.
And Nathan is also there.
I'm somewhere. I don't know. Technically, I am online. So yeah, if for everyone, all the listeners, if you need to send us an email too, you can find us at Janchi Show.
Nathan,
at
this
Just
isn't
Like
the part
Media.
of the show where we do that.
It is. We're done.
No, we
No.
do that during
Could
the
we do
food
that for the
portion.
food?
do it at both. I thought because we cut out
No.
the food portion.
No.
Just this
Just cut
portion.
that out. Never mind. Ignore that.
Nathan.
I like he
All
just
right.
gave you future KJ a note. He just cut this out,
Yeah.
future KJ.
We used to do it twice. I hated that.
Well, now we're
No,
doing
we
it
did
once.
it. We did it differently. Here,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, I think
whatever.
we did it
Anyways,
Anyways,
thanks for hanging out with us.
Yeah,
it
thanks
has
for
been
having
a
me.
pleasure. Thank you for telling your story, for chatting to us about Disney villains and everything in between.
Yeah.
We are going to go to a break, and when we come back, we will be chomping down with another Munch addict item. I almost called it Munchbox, but it's
know,
not
we
Munchbox.
always
It's
almost
Munchbox.
call it
Have that
Xbox.
pause.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back, everybody. We are here, or welcome for the first time for our YouTube viewers. We are here with Kaytie Ohashi to try a new Munch Addict box snack. And I don't know what it is, so Nathan, please tell me what it is.
Oh,
Do you not know?
I don't know it because it's in Korean. I just know it has vitamin C on it, and it's an apple, what appears
saw
to be
that.
candy.
Yes, we are eating
So-
Crown's Mychew sagwa flavor or
Chew-
apple
so is
flavor.
it a chewy candy then?
Yes.
I'm assuming so.
My wife tells me it's like
wife.
Haichu, which I can't remember if we
okay.
had that here on the show or not.
No,
but-
I've had a Haichu in the past, but I don't really remember. I
I
like that
really
there's
hope
vitamin
this is
C in
candy.
it. I don't know. It's like
I
You
really
can
hope
smell
this is
this.
Does
You
it
can
smell
smell
good?
this before you even open it.
I couldn't
Ah.
smell it.
Your sniffer must be like Dule Hill level on
Well,
psych.
I used to be pregnant, so
super
you
sniffer.
know.
Oh yes,
I have a
heightened
mom.
senses.
Yeah.
That's
So
true.
there's
What,
So I
individually
could smell it
wrapped.
in the packaging.
KJ, what does it
amazing.
say on the front? What is the?
Individual.
It says
Mychew.
Mychew.
That does say
Mychew.
Mychew. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
and then sagwa is the little yellow that just means apple.
It also means apology.
Really?
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Look,
at
at
that.
you coming in with that
Getting
Korean
some knowledge here.
It's only
Like
because
it.
I watch Running Man.
It also, for some reason, says 6.1% on the front, and I don't know.
I
What
think
that
that's percent apple juice.
means.
Here, those look like a
okay.
little banana square.
Oh, these are
or
smaller
apple
than I
square.
thought.
Tengman Hwangsanji.
Crown
Yeah, I don't know.
apple chew. I'm ready.
It's got a little tab to pull to
Oh.
open, which is nice.
It looks like
I
the
approve.
consistency of a Laffy Taffy. It's like hard at first.
Oh. Oh, now I smell it. Once I take the little plastic off. Yeah. I'm
Mhm.
like 4
I
steps
approve of
behind
this
y'all.
snack.
I'm getting there.
Because I just
Mhm.
ate dinner and I was
Oh, yeah.
wanting a snack.
I'm about to eat dinner.
If
so.
I chew right into the microphone, we can get some a mukbang.
Or ASMR.
Nope.
Yeah. Stop masticating in front of our listeners.
Sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, you
listeners.
It's making me
Masticator.
salivate.
It is.
Yeah, it really makes me salivate. It's very.
Mhm.
Nathan's eyes got so wide when he started chewing this. I know you're going to give it a 5 because you just love
All right,
it.
here we go.
I'm
Oh,
doing
are
it
we
now.
rating this too?
Patrick's,
we rate it.
Patrick's predictions.
Whoa!
Nathan's
As long as it
getting a
doesn't
5.
pull any of my fillings out.
It's
I'm
like a
good.
chewy Jolly Rancher.
Yeah, I like the taste of this. I like the apple flavoring.
It's super juicy.
it is.
It just keeps like coming. The flavor keeps coming.
It does.
It really
Yeah,
does.
with the
Screw
whole
gum.
one, too.
I'm only going to
It's
chew these from now
juicy.
on.
Oh,
I
this
like
is my chew. Mm-hmm.
Because with gum, you have to do something with it when you're done with it. This is like
I don't. Hot take. I
you
just,
just swallow it.
Mm-hmm. I've been doing it
Are you
for over
serious?
7 years.
Wow.
You just
for real?
swallowed this.
You
Yeah.
have 7 years
No,
of gum in your stomach.
Oh, okay.
Look, I've never seen it come out the other end. All right, so That's what I'm saying.
Not that you're aware of, but it probably does in some way.
I
Probably
mean,
degraded down into a different.
You probably
You
have
know-
a very
you know what it
well-coated
does.
bubble in your stomach.
Hopefully, the
so it's-
audience has already eaten too.
meh, it is what it is.
I like it. I think it's good.
I like it.
Yeah.
I'm about to eat all these. I gotta
Now I'm
say
gonna have to
something,
go
Emily.
have one of those Mychews to compare because I don't remember what those tasted like.
I think Mychew is like more milky.
And
When's
more
the last time you
square.
had a Mychew?
I feel like we had one on the
Yeah,
show,
no. Oh, we did?
No.
right?
Oh, I thought
don't
this was
think
like
so.
a
Do we not?
generic snack.
Am I gaslighting us?
Yeah, I don't
Am I
remember.
gaslighting myself?
I thought the Mychew was like a generic American snack. Is it not?
No.
I thought it was.
I don't know.
I
I
don't
thought
want
it
to
was.
say
I
anything.
thought it was still
I'm losing
Asian.
my phone. I'm
Asian.
going
I
for the
legitimately
wrong
I thought it
don't
was
know.
like Japanese or something.
Yeah, maybe it's Japanese.
Yeah, maybe
because
this
I do
is,
see it at
spell
the
it.
Japanese markets. So.
Apaki Pepero, like HY Chew, right?
Mm.
HY Chew.
So one's a Mychew and one's a Mychew.
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 Yeah,
Mychew.
Mychew.
That's
Yeah,
way too
Mychew
close. Mychew.
evolves into a Haichu
Pocky,
with
Pepero.
the
Those are-
Yellowstone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Those are
Yeah.
at Target.
Right next to your kimchi at Target.
Oh yeah, this is
Might be. No, it's not.
that'd be amazing. Maybe it's American. I don't know, man. Very good.
I like these
Let's
though.
let's jump into ratings.
Morinaga. That sounds Japanese.
Yeah, it does sound
company.
Japanese. As experts on basically nothing, that sounds Japanese.
As people who really would not know, we're gonna go ahead and say it's Japanese. We're gonna lock it in. At Japanese.
I mean, honestly, somebody could be like, "Yo, you've heard of Tokyo? What country is that in?" Be like, I'm not sure."
And
Well,
that's why
the
we have Google.
in the show's
Exactly.
canon, it's located
Haichus
here.
came from Japan. It is their version of
These things are good.
chewing gum that couldn't be swallowed.
Sure.
Interesting. You know what? Actually, I do remember when my name was Kyoko, when America came to Korea, and the Americans came to Korea, they brought chewing gum and they were like, "What is this?" So yeah, that's interesting. I don't know, like chewing gum is a thing that we all grew up with, and then they're like, "Yeah, this is our version of that, but you can swallow it."
Nice.
Yeah, I always
like
was
it.
worried about chewing gum because of the, I don't know, the natural rubber that's in it. It's,
What?
I just couldn't, I don't know, swallow it.
Sure.
So it's like, I don't want to swallow rubber.
Why would you say that? Now I
I'm
don't
just
wanna
so
eat gum anymore.
incredibly lazy.
I get it. I get it.
So, okay, ratings. Let's jump in. Katie, what is your rating? How many apples do you give this out of 5?
How many sleeping beauties?
Yeah,
Right?
you
I mean,
gotta
Snow
listen
White,
to
it
the
would be
connection
Snow
to
White.
the apple.
Yeah, there you
right?
It would be Snow White.
Snow White. Oh,
Wow,
Dang.
Nathan, do you even Disney?
I don't. I just,
He says he doesn't.
let's take that out.
I mean, Snow White is not
done.
really a good example, but because the apple is poisonous,
Exactly.
Right.
Well,
can't
that's true.
eat it. But I would give
But
it
these
a
are far from
good,
that.
like 4.5.
4.5 out of 5 apples.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Why? What puts it right at 4.5? What would put it? What would take it to a
It's-
5?
It's a good snack size for me. I have a smaller mouth, so I feel like it's a good size. It's chewy, it's delicious, it's juicy. Like the flavor just keeps coming and coming. But for me, I'm lazy and I don't like to chew forever, and I
I
do
like
feel like I
that.
had to chew for quite a while.
Mm.
But I mean, Mychew, I get it. I totally get it. I'm down for it. I would totally eat it again. I actually have an assortment pack, so I have strawberry and grape to eat too.
Oh, the
Yeah.
strawberry
Actually,
sounds so good. Dang it.
does.
Yeah, I mean,
Munch
right.
addict.
yeah.
I don't want
the
this
heck?
one.
All right, Nathan, how about you?
Agreed. I like the size that it's just a little bit smaller than the Mychews. But like I said, I need to compare now. But before I compare, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. Like you said, it opened my eyes. It's funny when you call it juicy, Katie. I'm like, it's not really juicy. It's my own saliva that's actually the juicy part.
I feel like the flavor keeps coming. Like it
I do
keeps
too.
like smacking
It
me.
makes it juicy. Yeah, it's like making my mouth just salivate.
Yeah.
So that right there is an interesting take. So I would eat it again, and I like the fact that it's not gum, so I don't have to spit it out or swallow it like KJ.
But I hope you
fine.
did swallow it.
We can.
It's
been
currently
spitting it out.
stuck to the top of my
Okay.
my mouth, so I can
saving it
talk
for
without,
later?
yeah, it's a saving thing. Yeah, exactly.
It's clogging up his soft palate. Yeah.
We run the tape back. He's spitting it out on the side. What did you say? I'm giving it a 4.5 out of 5 as well. I think that I wish it was a different flavor. That's the one reason I'm not giving it a 5. I want a different flavor, but it's really good. I like it. It just, I needed this specific snack to sate me after dinner. So what's going on there? What are you showing us?
So here's the
dissect
deal.
the package?
I am gonna give this a 4. I probably would have given it a 4.5, but I'm gonna give it a 4 because it's delicious in all the ways that were previously described. I don't mind a little mastication, so that's fine. So I've eaten 2. I shook the thing out to get out. 2 more fell out, and then I couldn't get out the rest of them. So I literally had to destroy the packaging in order to get any of them out.
They're making
And
you work for it.
Yeah, you know what? I don't appreciate that. I will say though, actually, like the wrapper itself reminds me of those like Andes mints that you used to get in Olive Garden.
Yeah.
It's like, as a 10-year-old, that's like almost better than the breadsticks and the pasta that you ordered. It was
100%.
Yep. So
Well, now I
anyways.
wish it was one of those. Thanks.
Sorry, bro. Anyways, so yeah, 4 out of 5. If they had gotten the packaging right, if they, fell out perfectly, I think it would have taken it up to at least a 4.5. Oh, I will say, I don't know how many y'all have eaten, but no, I used the little tab thingy.
Oh, okay. Ooh, strawberry.
I will say, after having eaten 2 and now about to pop a third in my mouth, it does coat the throat like a Laffy Taffy, which I don't love as a singer and also as a person who breathes. So, yeah.
I only have 4 left.
So if you're a person who breathes, you might not like
left?
Yeah.
Going to
Holy
town.
junk! How did you even do that?
Or you run the
Did you
tape
just
back. You'll see
swallow
me.
them?
I'm
Jeez.
chomping them down.
This is my
KJ,
chew, not my swallow.
KJ, when you were showing the thing and then you were telling that story, I 100% thought you were going to say there were only 4 in your package. And it was just empty. But even worse, you had to destroy it to get to the rest.
So that is that. Crown, you've made a pretty good product. Munch Addict, thanks for bringing it to us.
Thanks, Munch Addict.
Making it available. Kaytie, thank you so much for hanging out with us, for giving us such a wonderful interview. One more time for the listeners at home, where can people find you on the internet?
So people can find me on Instagram at DizVillainScholar. And my podcast also has a website, thewonderfulworldofdisneyvillains.com. So you can also find me there.
All right, well, somebody else wrap this up because I'm busy chewing down another.
Yeah, I was just chewing down another one. Now I only have 3 left.
Everyone talk amongst yourselves.
Major regrets. Yeah. I'm just going to play some music here while we all finish chewing, and then we'll come back and wrap it up.
All right. Well, you can find us on all the social media platforms at Janchi Show. You can also send us an email to janchishow@justlikemedia.com. Please, if you enjoy the show, enjoy what we do here, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and whatever the podcast apps that provide reviews. And also subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're watching this on YouTube. That would be great. You can find me at Patrick in the World on most everything and at P. Armstrong on Clubhouse.
You can find me at N. Nowak at Instagram. And we also have that Buy Me a Coffee page up. So if anybody would like to support us, janchishow.com/support. And we would love, to eat more snacks and masticate more food for you.
Gross, Nathan. Not massive. We're not gonna like mother bird somebody.
Is that what that means?
What?
Is that what that means?
He said masticate for listeners. I'm like, I'm not gonna chew something up and then spit it out into their
This was
mouths.
ASMR. What? No, we're not
Gross.
doing that anymore.
Well, that's
Anyways.
how close we are with our fans.
It's a tight-knit community. It's fine.
We'll share our food.
Does it border on cult? Maybe. I don't know. It's fine. You can find me at KJ Relke on all the places that I want to be found. I think that's it. I guess I normally say all this stuff, but
yeah, I said it this time.
We got it for you.
Wonderful.
Thank you again,
Now we don't know how
Kaytie.
to end the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I've broken the
We've
rhythm.
done it in the wrong order.
And thank you, Mychew.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. We will see you next week. Until then, Janchi Heyo.
Bye.
I only have 3 of these left.